Okay, in this lesson we're going to talk about the present subjunctive. The subjunctive is one, in English, it's, for example, if I said, if I were to have a nickel for every time I heard that, that'd be the English subjunctive. And you hear that occasionally, but usually in English we don't use it. In Spanish, though, it gets used all the time. Now, let me explain how it gets used in Spanish most of the time. I have here on the board behind me a sentence. This sentence is, I hope that it goes well for you. Okay. Now, let's talk about the parts of this sentence and how the subjunctive works. You start with a verb that expresses, in this case, expresses hope. And this verb is going to fall into a group of categories. Here underneath that sentence, I have this group of categories that the verb will fall into. The verb will be something that expresses uncertainty, or maybe wishing and wanting, what you want someone to do. It might express emotion, doubt, or denial. Or it might express some impersonal statement like, it's important that you brush your teeth 4 times a day, or whatever. And then this last category, the N, is for negation. You're negating whatever. For example, if I said, I'm sure that, or it is certain that that's the way it happens. To negate that, I would say, it is not certain that's the way it happens. I would negate it in that case by putting a not in it. And Spanish does something similar. Okay, so I have a verb that expresses one of these 7 categories, and it happens in the first part of the sentence. It forms the first thought, the first clause, or the main clause of the sentence. In this case, espero, the word for I hope, is my first clause. After that clause, I have a que. That's equivalent to the English that. I hope that. So I've got a main clause for this verb, and then I have a that, and then I have this second clause here. It's not the main idea, it's a secondary idea, and in English a lot of times these are referred to as a main clause here, and then the second one would be the subordinate clause. Okay. In the main clause, the verb is normal present tense. It doesn't have a weird conjugation, at least not any weirder than normal for present tense verbs. But the second clause, the one that's in the subordinate position, the subordinate clause, has a verb that is a little odd looking for those of us who are familiar with the present tense in Spanish. And this odd looking conjugation is subjunctive. And so I have an idea that expresses one of those and a that, and then I have a second clause, and in the second clause that verb will be a subjunctive verb. Okay. Now again, the categories that bring on the subjunctive are these: uncertainty, wishing or wanting, emotion, doubt, denial, impersonal statement, and negation. Some of these categories overlap a little bit. For example, doubting and denial can overlap with uncertainty. Negation can overlap with uncertainty. If I said I'm sure, or if I said I'm not sure, if I negate it, then that negation actually expresses uncertainty, doesn't it? I'm not sure. Okay, that's expressing uncertainty. Okay. Now, that's the first introductory part to understanding the subjunctive. In the next part of the lesson, I will discuss how you conjugate these verbs in the subjunctive, how you get this weird-looking form like the value that I have there. In this instance, we're conjugating some verbs from Spanish into the present subjunctive. And the regular present, or the present indicative, differs from the present subjunctive in the following ways. You start with the yo form of whatever verb that it is. In this case, I have the verb bailar, that's a regular AR verb. So the yo form is the stem plus a O. All right, so the yo form gets you your stem of your verb, or your stem of your subjunctive conjugation at least. And then if it's an AR verb, you switch to E's. If it's an ER verb like tenere, you switch to A's. But let's look again at bailar. Okay. Notice that the yo form has the E. And the la usted form, the third person singular, also has an E. This is similar to the imperfect tense, where the yo form and the third person singular forms are the same. So we have baile, bailes, baile, bailemos, bailes, bailem. Basically, I take the stem, and then I put E endings, making sure that the yo form also has an E. Now let's look at tener. In the case of tener, it doesn't have a regular yo form. It's a stem change verb, but it has a G in its yo form. It's tango. So I start with the yo form of the verb, tango. And that's where I get my base for my subjunctive. In this case, I take off the O, and the part that's left is my base, the T-E-N-G. Tener, though, is an ER verb. ER and IR verbs are going to get A's in the subjunctive. So I take my base and I give it my A. And the LAU stem form also has the A. These two are the same. But the other endings are all regular AR verb endings for the present tense. So I have tanga, tangas, tanga, tangamos, tangais, tangana. You take the yo form of the verb and then you switch. If it's an ER or IR verb, it gets an A. If it's an AR verb like this, it gets E's. Okay, now I have 4 more verbs here that represent categories. I had a regular verb with just stem plus an ending, then I had a verb like tener that had an unusual yo form, but it followed the rule, at least you start with the yo form and you add endings. Now, let's look at some other categories of subjunctive conjugation. Poder. Poder is a stem change verb. It's O to UE. And poder here serves as a model for what most of the stem change verbs in the present tense do in the present subjunctive. They stem change in the same 4 places that they do it in the present indicative, the normal present tense, and then they switch E to A, I to A, and A to E. They switch endings. AR verbs get E's, ERs and IRs get A's. In this case, I have an ER verb, so it gets A's. So I have my stem change and the same 4 positions, and the we position and the vosotros positions don't stem change, just like they don't in the normal present tense. And that's how the conjugation works. And most of the stem change verbs in the present tense work this way. There are other verbs that just do weird things. Here I have the verb ser. It keeps its E, and that's the thing that's weird about it, but notice it's say-a. It sort of does its own thing. The verb ear does that too. It starts off with value. The yo form is voy, but it goes to value. And so there are categories of verbs you just have to memorize the conjugations for. There's 5 or 6 of those. There's another category of verbs that are all AR verbs, but when you switch to the E for the subjunctive, it causes problems with 3 letters, C's, G's, and Z's. And the reason is if I follow a C with an E, it changes from a K sound to an S sound. If I follow a G with an E, it changes from a hard G to a soft G. It sounds like an H. If I change a Z, follow a Z with an E, it makes it a little bit more fricative, a little bit more Z. And Spaniards always like for their Z's to sound like a double S or a TS, like in 60 fly. And so when you have one of those 3 letters, you change. This C, for example, in tokar is going to change to a QU to keep that hard K sound. A G will change to a GU, like a yegar. The yo form would be LLEGUE, yege, for the subjunctive. Or a verb like cazar, to hunt, is ZAR on the end, and the yo form is going to be CACE. I changed the Z to a C, and then I put my N. And so tokar represents that group of verbs. There's a final group of verbs here that has a fairly complicated explanation. So let's talk about servir here and let it serve as our model. Servir is an E to I stem change verb. And all the verbs that fall into this particular category are IR verbs. For example, you know that in the normal present tense, servir has the E to I in the yo form, the to form, the LA usted form, and this last conjugation, eius ustedes, third person plural. But verbs that fall into a certain group, also in the subjunctive, have a stem change in the we form and the vosotros form. Unlike poder here, which did not have a stem change, this group of verbs does. But you should be fairly familiar with these verbs at this point in studying Spanish. For example, you should have already learned the present progressive at this point, and you learned how to form present participles. You had a lot of verbs that went E to I or O to U in the present participle. For example, dormir goes to durmiendo, servir is sirviendo, pedir is pidiendo. This group of verbs that goes E to I or O to U in the present participle. The same group of verbs, the exact same ones, And the preterite forms in the third person go E to I. For example, servir in the third person singular preterite is servio with an I, and servieron in the third person plural. Pedir is pedio, pedieron. Dormir, dormio, dormieron. They do the same stem change in the preterite, third person forms, as they did in the present participle. All of these verbs that have that characteristic will also have the same stem changes in the we form and the vosotros form. Here you have servir that goes E to I there, which is unusual for stem change verb. And from the ones that go O to U, for example, dormir is a stem change verb. Duerma, duermas, duerma, and duermen for the third person plural. But the vosotros form, the nosotros forms are durmamos and durmais, O to U, just like they did in the preterite and in the present participle. Okay, now, these verbs all represent some problem conjugations, let's say, within the subjunctive. I have stem change verbs that basically usually stem change in the same place as in the present tense, and then they switch ERs get A's, IRs get A's, and ARs get E's. You have another group of verbs that are all AR verbs that end in CAR, GAR, and ZAR, and you have to have a stem change to keep the correct pronunciation of that last consonant of the stem. You have some verbs like there that just have weird conjugations that you have to remember. And this last group is probably the most complicated one. It's verbs that are stem change verbs. They're all IR verbs, but they have a change of E to I or O to U in the present participle, or in the third person forms of the preterite. And they also, the same exact verbs will have that same stem change in the nosotros form and the vosotros forms of the subjunctive.